Hi everyone, and welcome to GoLocal Live. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in this finally sunny Tuesday afternoon here in Providence as we check in down at the University of Virginia with Professor of Political Science Jennifer Lawless. Jennifer, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
We are just doing fine and dandy up here, but as we look to the national picture, want to just check in with the impending announcement of former Vice President Joe Biden, as has been expected for about the last week, to announce this week, but it appears that the announcement itself is constantly changing. So let's talk a little bit as Biden looks to get out of the gates, how the announcement has kept changing and leaks getting out about where he might or might not go, and now it looks like he's doing a video announcement.
Right, so as of right now, he'll announce via video on Thursday, and then his first campaign event will be on Monday in Pittsburgh, and then he's scheduled to do a batch of events throughout the week next week, including in Iowa. A couple of things could be happening here. The first is the campaign could be misjudging where they thought they would be warmly welcomed to launch. Charlottesville, obviously where I am right now, was on his short list. The question then became, is he exploiting a tragedy that the city would like to get away from by launching a campaign here? So I think that it was either a misstep or it was a leak that people didn't expect to get out. But the reality is that it's hard to come up with a campaign where the launch really set the tone for the entire campaign and either sunk a candidate or propelled them to victory. So I think we're talking a lot about it because we've been waiting so long for him to get in. But at the end of the day, it's probably not that important.
How high are the expectations for the video launch? I mean, what do you anticipate is the message that Biden is going to try to convey as he hops into 2020 officially?
So my bet is that he's going to frame himself as a proven candidate who can right this ship. And he is the next in line from the Obama administration. So if there's anybody that's interested in returning to the pre-Trump presidency, in a lot of ways, Joe Biden is the way to go. He can pick up where Barack Obama left off. He can restore a lot of the relationships that had been problems. And my bet is that that's how he's going to frame himself. The challenge, of course, is to demonstrate that he also has the ability to look to the future and to embrace new challenges and move in a new direction. So it's a little bit tricky because his experience is his biggest asset, but he has to seem forward-looking and fresh as well.
So he's got to balance a lot of not competing, if you will, but as you mentioned, again, having the experience with that call to look forward. In your estimation, how much of the party really wants to harken back to the Obama administration?
I think 100% of the party wants to defeat Donald Trump. And if this message is something that seems to resonate with voters, or if it's something that he actually does wind up pushing and it seems to have traction, I think the party is going to be fine with that. That doesn't mean that we can't continue to address new issues or challenges. It doesn't mean that there won't be radical reforms when it comes to policies like education or the criminal justice system. But it does mean that this is somebody who is a tried and true person to undo everything that Donald Trump has done for the last 3 years.
So we've been seeing a lot out of the other campaigns in recent days. We've seen Senator Elizabeth Warren put forth her proposal to relieve Americans of a college student loan debt. We've also seen proposals, Bernie Sanders talking that inmates should have the right to vote, and of course reaction from the multitude of other candidates that are currently running as well. What does the entrance of Biden into the race now mean, again, with this crowded primary field clamoring for oxygen in a room that's going to get very difficult to be able to get some moving forward?
It means, I think, that the current percentages that the front runners have in the polls, Bernie Sanders in particular, are very fluid. And there's a good chance that Biden will peel off support from a lot of these people. By the same token, given the popularity around some of the plans that have been circulating, whether it be regarding Medicare for all or college student loan forgiveness, I think Joe Biden is in a position where he's probably going to find himself pushing for a lot of those policies as well. And because they've already been introduced by other candidates, he can't credit claim for them. Now, he can talk about the things that the Obama administration did that laid the groundwork for these kinds of policies to be popular, but he's not going to be in a position where he's going to be able to portray himself as the innovator. One other thing I would mention, though, especially regarding the student loan stuff, is that a lot of these town halls and a lot of the debate and discussion that we've seen from these Democratic candidates has been heavily influenced by questions asked by college students at these different fora. And so while I have no reason to believe that these candidates don't think it's important to engage in student loan forgiveness, and Elizabeth Warren's plan is quite clear, right? Forgive $50,000 in student loans if your income is up to $100,000, and then still even a proportion that gets you up to a $250,000 income threshold. I can't imagine that most people are going to vote based on that. They're not going to be single issue student debt forgiveness voters. But it is a way to generate enthusiasm. It is a way to get young people engaged in the process. And it's a way, I think, to differentiate the Democrats from the Republicans. But sort of these small differences among the Democrats will probably all come out in the wash.
And speaking of Democrats and differences among the party, obviously the call following the release of the redacted Mueller report by some within the party to start impeachment proceedings for President Donald Trump, and the reaction from Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi that she's got no appetite to do so. How much longer are we going to see impeachment palooza?
For a while, I think. Most of the candidates running for president have not taken a firm position on the issue. Elizabeth Warren has been the most outspoken, where she's called for impeachment. Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders are sort of moving in that direction. The others say they want more information. At this point, honestly, we know everything we're going to know. What else do we need to know? I think it's ridiculous that people are not coming down on one side or the other. And I think it's completely legitimate to say, look, we're not going to impeach because the Senate doesn't have the votes and it would be a distraction. And I think it's completely legitimate to say, look, regardless of the outcome, it's our responsibility. This guy committed crimes and he obstructed justice, and this is our responsibility as members of Congress. But pick a side and then advocate for it. This constant, well, I need more information, I think represents to the American people exactly what they don't like about Congress. And it looks like people's inability to really consider quite a volume of information that they've already acquired and make a decision. So I think it's going to continue until we've heard probably from Mueller himself, and that could take a very, very long time.
Is the call to impeachment or not really the third rail for Democrats right now?
It might be. I mean, I'll be interested to see what Joe Biden says about this. I'd also be interested to see more specifically if in the next town hall debates and meetings, this continues to garner a lot of attention. One thing that I thought that was very interesting was on the Sunday morning news programs when Jerry Nadler, who's the chair of the Judiciary Committee, was asked if he thinks the evidence comes out that Donald Trump did in fact obstruct justice, if that's an impeachable offense. He paused, thought about it a lot, and ultimately said yes. And he's been one of these people that has been sort of on the fence and quite tepid about moving forward with impeachment. So it's possible that as more and more people read this 448-page report, and as more and more discussion and analysis comes out from it and clarification comes out, that people will move. But I think at this point, it's hard to know how it's gonna shake out.
Do you think there are grounds for to start impeachment proceedings?
Yes.
Well, not Jennifer
I mean,
Lawless.
I will say
no third rails for Jennifer Lawless.
I mean, I will say that it's a potentially politically risky move, but if you look back to 2000, the Republicans had apparently suffered quite a public opinion hit by impeaching President Clinton. His approval numbers went way up, but it didn't cost them anything in the 2000 election. And if you compare these circumstances to those circumstances, I think it's a no-brainer that these offenses reach a bar that those did not.
Speaking of the president, let's talk a little bit about the White House Correspondents' Dinner and his recent directive, if you will, that administration officials boycott said dinner.
Yeah, so I don't think Donald Trump has gotten the message that when they're not at work, these people don't have to do everything he says. So Donald Trump has apparently mandated that the entire administration boycott the White House Correspondents' Dinner because they're A, very boring, the comedians, and B, very negative. Now, the notion that the Trump White House should be boycotting something because it's negative is in and of itself laughable. But beyond that, the idea that the president thinks that he can tell his staff what to do on their own time is appalling. And apparently, many people in the White House tried to talk him out of this, but he was vehement about pursuing this line of directive.
Do you think staffers, do you think officials will break ranks and go to the dinner?
I think they'd be crazy to break ranks, which is part of the reason that this is so scary. I mean, if they break ranks, we know that this is somebody who will have absolutely no qualms whatsoever about firing them or publicly humiliating them or making their lives miserable. That said, I'm not sure many of them are clamoring to go. They're going to be the butt of every joke, but I do think they probably feel a little bit better about themselves, and I'd feel a little bit better about our democracy if they made the decision not to go and weren't, responding to the directive of the president.
And finally, impeachment aside, let's talk about next steps now from the Democrats with the response to the report, the Mueller report being released.
I think they have to figure out how much more time they want to spend investigating and exactly what it is that they want to investigate. We knew that when the Democrats regained the majority in the House, their investigatory authority was going to be one of their biggest strengths, and they believed that that was a way to hold the president accountable, regardless of whether they would ultimately impeach. And so, there are still numerous investigations going on. There are still numerous witnesses being called, and I think that's where we should be watching. That's where all the action is going to be for the next several months.
Do you think there's an appetite from the American public, as you said, leading back to your assertion that you believe there was enough evidence there for impeachment proceedings, but the American public, do you think there are still outstanding questions that weren't answered in the Mueller report that people are really clamoring to know, and an appetite, again, for this continued time and resources paid by Congress to do so?
Polls indicate no, right? So polls indicate that the American public has had enough, let's move on. But we also know that when the initial report came out and when Barr delivered his summary of it, the White House and the Justice Department spun those findings in a way that gave them complete control over the news cycle for 2 weeks and basically pushed forward a message of exoneration. And so I think the onus is on the Democratic Party right now to try and convince the American people that that's what happened and that they need to rethink their views about this, given that it was a misrepresentation of the report. And by all accounts, it seems like it was a misrepresentation of the report, or although one that's certainly understandable if you are a Republican or if you're Donald Trump. They were able to get out the message that they actually wanted to get out. But no, if I were looking just at public opinion polls today, I don't think there's an appetite for impeachment. I do think that that information has not been fully delivered to the American public.
Anything else keeping an eye on besides the reaction to Biden hopping in the race before we talk next week?
The only other thing I would say that is that will be interesting to me will be Trump's reaction to Biden hopping into the race. And also Bernie Sanders' reaction to Biden hopping into the race, because my bet is that he's going to see the biggest drop in his support. And it'll be interesting to see whether he's willing to go head-to-head with Biden this early on in a Democratic campaign.
Well, lots to keep an eye on, and as always, appreciate getting the opportunity to pick your brain again down at the University of Virginia. Jennifer Lawless, thank you for taking the time to Skype in today.
Of course.
Okay. We're going to let Jennifer Lawless go down at the University of Virginia. We're going to get a lot more local here on GoLocal Live, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.